Hi, I'm Lisa Eddy, your host of the Sacred Beauty Lifestyle Podcast. I'm so glad that you've made your way here and that I'm now sharing these podcasts here on YouTube. In my 25 years in the beauty industry, I have worked with thousands of women. I have witnessed so many beautiful, powerful, smart, and kind women who are hiding instead of shining. My mission is to empower you to own your true power and beauty inside and out, to be truly confident and shine through your skin. Lord knows the world needs your light. I'm committed to helping you understand the choices that you are making that are working for or against you. I'll also be sharing beauty tips and tools your mother never taught you, and together we will bust urban beauty myths. Make sure to subscribe today to receive episodes right when they are released. For those who prefer listening to the audio podcast, head over to sacredbeautylifestyle.com. That's sacredbeautylifestyle.com, and you can find the platform of your choice. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Sacred Beauty Lifestyle Podcast. Today, I am so excited to share Rachel Kaplan, who is quite entertaining. She is also a licensed psychotherapist and the creator and host of the iTunes acclaimed new and noteworthy podcast, The Healing Feeling Shit Show. Rachel has dedicated the last 25 years to relentlessly studying healing after she lost her first love to suicide. After scouring the world's healing technologies, ranging from the spiritual practices of East Asia to the cutting edge trauma resolution techniques of Western psychology, she found that the true secret to healing is as simple as going to the bathroom. Who knew? In addition to her thriving private practice based in the San Francisco Bay Area, she offers her lighthearted but precise and effective approach, what she calls emotional potty training for grown-ups, through her podcast, group courses, through the Emotional Shit Show, and is working on publishing the book version of season 1. Without further ado, welcome, Rachel. So happy to be here with you today.
Thank you so much for having me and introducing me to your babies.
Yes, I think that you fit right in, as we were kind of just having a little powwow before we logged on here. Is, what is true beauty? And it's really owning all of who you really are, and it's letting your inner light shine. And there are so many people in emotional pain that don't know how to deal with it because we're not taught.
Right, exactly.
So I wonder if you want to start just telling us a little bit more about you. I know we got a great intro through the bio here, but a little bit more about your journey, which sounds really freaking intense for such a young woman to go through.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to. I mean, I'll just start by saying I came into the world with the same issues that most people have around just being raised by humans, which means flawed and emotionally injured people. So I had all that stuff too, as far as right before I came to that pivotal tragedy in my life, I had very little self-esteem. And then my first love, the first person I really attached intensely to, took his own life. And it was a very convoluted story. It's actually in my first season of my podcast, episode 4. If people want a good cry, I'm very proud of that episode. It's just the memoir. But yeah, it really changed the entire course of my life. And now, almost 30 years later, not quite, but in 2 years, it will be 30 years later. I hold that tragedy as a profound gift because, or at least, I mean, it's now I'm strong enough to hold both, that it was something that initiated me. It took the majority of my life to actually overcome it and heal from it, but it's something that ripened me into a very wise catalyst and companion for people who are trying to heal. And at the same time, I can also hold, as you were saying, we can hold all of ourselves, that it's been a tremendous burden, and it's really impacted a lot of the personal aspects of my own capacity to love and feel safe in the world. So it's really been, it's set the tone for my life. And what's so fun about where I am right now is that after truly, I mean, we have a connection who I knew from the yoga world. I've been a yoga teacher for a long time. I'm currently retired from that, but it sent me all over the world to study all of the different aspects. And I've been a licensed psychotherapist, practicing for almost 17 years. And the thing that I'm really championing right now and bringing forward is the thing that actually made the difference for me from kind of hobbling around and feeling mostly okay, but with this deep down core wound still, or core shame. And what I see in the world, the therapeutic world, the spiritual world, the new age world, is that most people are hobbling around. They're compensating, they're covering, and that there are profound misunderstandings even in the therapeutic world about emotions and about healing. And so I'm kind of making it my mission to simplify and make really clear and fun, ideally, sometimes at least, what is the thing that you don't understand that will actually get you from the place of kind of functioning and secretly hoping that no one really sees that one little part of you, to actually feeling like, here I am, good, bad, and ugly, beautiful, strong, human, and capable of facing what it is to be a human. Because as we know, there's like tremendous amounts of pain. There's no way around that. There's nothing wrong with you if you have pain, but kind of what I call emotional resilience, which I think is better than happy. And so that's what I'm focusing on now. And it's a lot of fun and it's a lot of poop talk. And I'm thrilled to do it with your audience and with you, Lisa.
You are such a joy, and wow, a plethora of information. I wonder if you can share what you would say. I don't know if you had said misconceptions or misunderstandings about emotions, even in the world of psychotherapy. Can you share with the podcast and myself what those are?
Yeah, I mean, at the heart of it, it's that I think there's a few things, and it really depends. I mean, there's so many types of therapy, and there's so many types of therapists. Like even within any kind of modality, depending on how far someone has taken their own healing, or how capable they are of stretching a technique into a really depthful approach, you'll see a range, you know. And there are a few modalities that I think are really hitting it on the nail. But in general, I will say I think some of the shortcomings are that there's an approach that deals more with surface and thoughts and mindset. And this is prevalent in the new age world too, versus core. Like looking at, for instance, you know, people who are doing affirmations in the mirror and trying to focus on their mindset. You know, it's like kind of like putting a scratch and sniff sticker over a pile of poo, because you know you can say the thing, but if there's this deep down part of you that truly feels like you're a worthless piece of poo, like the resonance that you're going to create in your world will be based on that deeper thing. And so I think that a lot of the CBT, DBT, while helpful and with the right practitioner could be profoundly life changing, I think that those are often limited. And then the other thing I would say is that I think the industry in general focuses more on managing emotions. And so, like, a good example is if what we hear about anger, which I do think is the most misunderstood emotion and most taboo emotion, especially for people culturally conditioned as women. What we hear is anger management, you know, and there's like anger management courses. And I like to think of the emotions elementally based on who my deepest mentor was. He was like a really earth connected healer who lived in a mud hut. Okay. Not a therapist, scathing of therapy in some way. But he helped me really understand the emotions. And according to him, they are actually elemental in our bodies. But can you imagine what natural element would correspond with anger?
Fire.
Yeah, right. It's like very obvious. So if you think about fire, we know fire that is dangerous and destructive. We know that we are cautious with the fire, but it's not bad, right? We like cook our foods with fire, our cars, electricity. You know, we use fire, but we use it with care. If we want a fire in our home, we're going to contain it. Fireplace, fire pit in the wild. So it needs care and caution, but it's incredibly useful. And if you've studied deeper, you know, like Ayurveda, for instance, the word for fire really has to do with this transformative quality within us. So to be in a world where we're telling people just to manage this thing or to kind of contain it or repress it, what you imagine is if you put fire, you condense it, eventually it will explode. And so instead, if you look at like indigenous land tending with fire, like, or, you know, proper fire management in the wild, it's like you have contained burns. You have you need to look at containment, right? You don't want to set the whole forest on fire, but there are small little burns that keep things from totally blowing up. And so what I have found, this is just an example of when I'm teaching people how to have their feelings, feel their feelings, move their feelings like their poop, I'm teaching people, how do you connect to the rage inside you, let it be, actually like sit in the vile, murderous nastiness of your being, physicalize it, have that little contained tantrum, and then recover so that you're never doing it on someone, you know, but you're teaching your body that you're allowed to have this, and you're clearing out the backlog of usually decades of repressed anger that is going to come out one way or the other. So like passive aggressiveness, or just the people who are constantly blowing up, which is the opposite, the explosive folks. So how do you kind of create a relationship that enables you to clear your body, come to present time, and be safe for others? So that's like the difference between like just don't get angry, or even like go have a few breaths, but don't be angry. It's like we're allowed to be angry. In fact, when we have a healthy current time connection with anger, it is so helpful in our life to show us something. If we have 30 years of repressed anger, it's not so helpful, you know? So that's an example of just instead of just trying to control something, we need to learn to relate to it in a safe way.
Such important work. And I love the depth and understanding that you shared with fire and anger, and how we often want to manage it and suppress it, really, like anger management. That is brilliant. And I remember remembering a quote from Maya Angelou: be angry, use it. That's what anger is for, is to use it. It's an indicator of something. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's our self-honoring. A lot of times when people, come into their own healing, or before they've really started healing, what most people, and especially the people who are more likely, and this is kind of something that is a little further down the road for me, but most feelings, they're energy. I'm sure you've like talked to people about that. People say energy and motion. I call them intense clusters of sensations rolling in squads. But if you take the E off, what's left is motion, right? So it means to move. And so basically the energetics of emotion, they more or less either explode or implode. All of them. And I only really teach people about 4 as far as their healing journey. But for the people who are generally imploders, and these are people who are heavy, they're stuck in their lives, they're lethargic, they're depressed, and they're angry at themselves. So there's like a self attack, right? And so for these people, as they learn to actually work with anger and let themselves be angry, and eventually let themselves be angry at something else, in order to do that, there has to be a self valuing. You have to get to a place where you're like, I didn't deserve that, in order to be angry about something that happened to you. And it's not about staying in a victim mentality, but about recovering from collapse and being able to own your space in your body and what you deserve and how you deserve to be treated. And we do that. The most transformative, quickest route to that is someone who has been kind of shut down, connecting to their anger and finding a way to move anger.
Oh, that is so good. I hadn't thought about, obesity, or weight, overweight, whatever you want to call it, as someone who's imploding. But of course, like I know this, and I love the connection that you've just made. It's interesting because my mother was incredibly abused. I had a lot of things happen to her that, it was really unfortunate and tragic, and never really healed from it. And she implodes, of course. And I
Yeah.
love that. I'm going to share that with her. I'm going to see if I can get her to get angry, not at me, but to
No,
release. I might
it's
have to turn her on to you. Yes.
I was just gonna say, I don't think I necessarily intended to say overweight in like body weight, but
Ah.
like the heavy lethargy energetically, it definitely often will manifest in the body. Just like someone who's like super fired up, the opposite extreme. If you look at anger, so you have the people who are never going to feel their anger except toward themselves, and they might be like less mobile, less active. More likely to use food to numb themselves. So that really does fit. On the other side of the spectrum, someone who's like super fired up and can't slow down and mad at everything, you might see some very extreme forms of manifestation in that way, and I don't know if you've ever done episodes, and we don't have to get into this, but on Ayurveda, but it's like, I think that you can see that like the fire element in Ayurveda, which is the lifestyle aspect of the yoga system, is pitta. Like, and so someone who is like super overly pitta'd is going to lose their hair and go gray, and they're going to be like super muscular and have really hot, fiery poops. It's like, anyway, so it's all connected, definitely all connected, which is why it makes sense to talk about this on a beauty podcast.
Right. And thank you for making that distinction. When I assumed or heard it as the heaviness being overweight, and yet it can be
Yeah,
both.
often. Yeah.
Right. This is so fascinating. Okay, so how did you come up with the correlation, the parallel to poop, and therefore the healing feeling shit show? Can you
Yeah.
tell us about this?
Thank you. That's a great question because it pulls us back a little to the beginning. I kind of dove into just delivering the weeds of it. But yeah, so I've been a therapist for a really long time, and what I found was what I'm really looking for is to use my language and the metaphors that I use as like an immediate transmission. And so, as tiny little children, what we were taught by our parents is when you get this rumbling of sensation in your guts, that there's only one way to not have it. And we need to get ourselves to a bathroom and leave a poop in the toilet. We say take a poop, but we actually leave it, right? And then we wash up and we learn how to clean ourselves, and then we go back, and that is how we're lighter, brighter, less full of shit. That's how we enjoy our day, right? Now, I've learned through my metaphor and through this, now 5-year journey of working with this metaphor, a lot of people have trouble pooping. And I do think that there is a correlation. And if you can get your emotions regular, that will likely change your experience. But I will just say it's not a given that everyone's like, no problem pooping. Okay. Okay. So that's something we were taught. Now, the reason I use this metaphor is that it's not that different. Those intense clusters of sensations, they're a lot like a cramping, rumbling stomach that says you have to poop. But instead, because no one taught us how to like relieve ourselves, what most of us have done and are doing, and then we're living in a world that's really profiting us off of us doing this, is we are more likely to consume, to distract. So we might eat something, we might post something, we might look for validation, we might look for distraction. And so I think the thing that is so brilliant about this metaphor is if I say to you, okay, let's say when you felt like you had to shit, would you eat something, smoke something, buy something, post something? Would
No.
you try that? Of course not. Right? You'd go and you just let the thing move through you, and that emotions are no different. And the metaphor is really endless around alignment. Like for instance, you know emotions, as important as they are, and like my whole life is dedicated at this point to teaching people, how do you actually feel them? How do you let them move through you? Okay. But they're not true. They often, and which is a little, people are like, what are you saying? Are you invalidating me? No. They can correlate to truth, but they're just true in that moment. And it's similar with our poops. Our poops are not true. They're not static. You don't look at any poop and think, that's me. That's what all my poops are going to be like from now on. That's that poop. And you have to get it out because it might not be true. It's very real, right? Your emotion is real. And if you don't release it, you're going to be backlogged and full of shit. But you don't need to identify with it. You don't need to feel bad for it. And I think the other thing that I love about this metaphor is like, we are pretty private about our poops mostly. Of course, there are the rare people who aren't. But so I think there is this kind of shame bridge between our feces and the act of releasing our shit, physically, and the part of us that feels like emotional shit. And I actually think that there's less shame about the physical act than the emotional state. And so I want to use that bridge because we know that everyone poops, and similarly everyone has a part that feels like poop, sadly, hopefully not in a couple generations. And so it's just this brilliant kind of like, you don't have to feel bad for this, you don't have to identify with it, you do have to learn how to do it, or you're going to be very, very sick. It's just like the transmission of how to work with emotion. It's almost immediate. I could go on and on, but I think that's good for now, right? And look,
It's so good. So she's holding up a mug showing me her poop. Is that poop on there?
that says coffee makes me poop. My sister got it for me.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Because you're all about the poops.
I love poop.
First of all, yeah, we leave a poop, we don't take a poop. Can we just like take that in for a second? Love that.
Truth.
And this correlation is actually perfect.
Yeah.
And I even noticed this with acne. There's a holding, just like you're talking about, we're holding the emotion sometimes, which is so interesting, right? We're holding the emotion that we actually don't want. We're holding
Yeah.
in reserve. I'm always fascinated by that.
Yeah. Right. It's like, and people are terrified when it comes to emotions. I think the biggest fear that I hear about is like, what if I start feeling, especially with grief, or sadness,
Mm.
if I start feeling my feelings, will I ever stop? And I'm like, I double dog dare you. Like, try to have your feelings for 3 minutes if your grandma didn't die or your dog or you didn't just get dumped. It's actually like an incredibly hard thing. And I'm not talking about like the malaise, like getting into a funk and you're kind of playing the same record. And I don't mean like music record, although that would actually be useful if you play a music that actually helps you feel. But most people are playing a mental record about something over and over again, and they're kind of impacted by the feelings, but they're not connected to the acute physical sensations. And so it doesn't go anywhere. But once you get into like an acute emotion moving through the body, it has a shelf life. It's like it's finite, the way our poops are finite, or the way sweating would be finite. Or, and I get it, all of the systems of the body have homeostasis, regulating things, and they're all kind of finite, more so than our minds. And so for someone to get into the feeling at that level, if they can cry more than like 20 minutes, they're like a master. Most people just can't sustain it until they build the capacity. So I personally am not worried about anyone getting stuck in their acute feelings, but everyone gets stuck in their like almost feelings, their funk.
Right. It's such a trip, how it's such a trick that
Mm-hmm.
we think we're going to get stuck in the acute, but we don't when we're actually moving it.
Yeah. And there's immediate relief, like, especially with sadness. I mean, there might be fatigue. A big cry is tiring, but it's like you can sink down into who you actually are. And if people are trying to avoid who they actually are, which pretty much most people are, there's this chronic fear and what most people call anxiety, that social anxiety, stress. It's like, I call it fear because it's more vulnerable. It's closer to what the feeling actually is. But when we actually feel how bad we feel, just momentarily, suddenly we can rest in ourselves. And so there's this ease and relief and alignment that happens. And it's so crazy because at the heart of it, if you don't get to the end of the podcast, what you need to know is like learning how to feel as bad as you feel. And there are some other steps, like how to care for yourself in that state, how to recover from that state. But at the heart of it, you're just learning how to let yourself feel how you feel. That's it. And like, there's one more thing I should say. Do you have a question or should I say it?
No, say it. I go.
Okay. Yeah. So what's interesting is when I was sitting with, what is the correlation between a beauty podcast and clearly like a deeply, whole person, whole spirit, whole soul beauty podcast and what I'm doing. And there's many ways, like some of them we've already addressed, like that sense of being who you are, like that's where our light comes from. That's where our organic, natural beauty comes from. But I think like in some way, if we look at the physical, and I am impacted by this. I don't know anyone, particularly people conditioned as women, who aren't trying to maintain or highlight or enhance their beauty, right? And we're taught that that's our value, and that we're supposed to keep it indefinitely. And, instead of we're taught our wisdom or our maturity is our value. But there's all this stuff there. But like what I have found is that the worse we feel inside, the more we feel like there might be some part of us that's unlovable, unacceptable, ugly, gross. And whether we were actually shamed for how we looked as kids, or maybe shamed for being connected to our sexuality as kids, or maybe shame for being overweight as kids, or, whatever it is, those wounds, and this is all about core wounds, and a lot of my teaching, one wing of what I'm teaching is about finding your core wounds. Those wounds end up like crystallizing deep in our being as truths. And that's part of why like the new age like affirmation mindset thing doesn't work, is because like I said, that part that feels like it's the truth, it doesn't matter. 98% of us could be like, I'm amazing. And that 2% is going to be like, I'm an ugly ghoul. So the uglier we feel inside, especially, connected to actual appearance, but the more likely we are to compensate, whether it's through fashion or like treatments or makeup, and so like the trick I can give you, and this is like $1,000,000 trick, okay? This took me like most of my life to learn, is that the only way, there's no level of accommodating or compensating that will actually make that part feel beautiful or feel lovable or acceptable. The thing that does is learning, first of all, how do you find that part? Because it's probably like tucked and repressed into your emotional basement closet because you're trying to not show anyone else that part. So you have to like find it and start to court it or invite it back. Because right now you've been ignoring it, thinking that that's the thing that will make you lose love, right? So there's a process around how to reconnect to these parts. And there's areas of my content that really focus on that process. But essentially, it's like what we have to learn how to do, because once we have that part kind of in our awareness, like back online, if you will, and once it trusts us enough to start opening up about how that part feels, that part is pissed and in tremendous pain because it's been our scapegoat. It's been like our secret ghoul, right? And so, and that's where like a lot of therapy messes it up, right? Because this is a trick I'm giving you. It's a hack. It's like therapy is going to be like, oh, but it was your mom's fault. And like, it didn't, like it was even saying like that was an injury. It wasn't you. It's like, that's useful, but that's not going to heal us. What we need in order to heal that part is pulling it back, welcoming it in, putting it on your lap, being like, hello, I want to know you. How are you? And then listening, through the way we actually live our lives, but ultimately listening to the emotional share and becoming, and this is like a very high level trick, becoming that part. Like that is us. We can look at it as a different part because that's helpful as far as like being willing to experience it, but actually realizing that pain, that part that's positive, it's unlovable and disgusting, is you. And in order to let it heal and help it heal, it needs to grieve as if that feeling is true. It needs to grieve as if the pain of feeling like a nasty, unlovable ghoul for 20 years. And once we let that happen, where we actually feel our feelings as if they're true, because that's how they are for that part. And then we support it and we hold it and we care for it. And then we like do our reality testing, which I could talk about maybe. It's like, which is just the process at the end where you come back to, no, wait. It's like where you bring thinking back. Was that true? Or was that actually something my mom put on me or my dad or whatever? It's like until we do that, which means we become the part and feel the pain as if it's true, we just end up covering it up. And so, if you want to feel beautiful, you have to feel the part of you that doesn't and really grieve and tantrum and release from that place. And then it's pretty simple and it can be pretty fast.
That is so good.
There you go. 30 years of work.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
You said something I'd like to come back to and have you elaborate a tiny bit because I think it's super important right now. You mentioned anxiety and we have anxiety at an all-time high right now. We're recording in December 2022. And the last couple of years, even in children, the stats of anxiety have just skyrocketed, right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned anxiety being people not being who they authentically are. Is that what I got?
Well, that is definitely a big part of it. What I would say about that is that if we don't feel permission to feel how we feel, there's no place to rest in our bodies. So there's no way to feel safe as we are. And so it's like, you're definitely going to feel scared. I think the most useful thing I could give someone newly coming into my world around anxiety is like, start calling it fear. Because anxiety is like, we've kind of all agreed it's kind of cool to be like, I'm stressed, or even like slightly less cool, but it's like kind of acceptable to be like, oh my God, I've been so anxious. But to go, let's say you're at a party, a Christmas party, we're about to be at the holiday season, and someone's like, how are you? For someone to say, I'm really scared. Like there's something so naked and raw about that. And what's helpful about that in order for our healing is, it's very hard to be checked out when you're saying out loud, I'm scared. And so what I encourage, and you don't have to be talking to someone else. In fact, a lot of what I'm teaching is trying to give people the tools to enhance their Wi-Fi hotspot emotional bandwidth themselves so they don't have to just dump on other people. That's what a lot of us know how to do, because we do need a strong connection in order to move these big feelings. And so a lot of people can't feel their feelings unless they like call a friend and vent. And there's a good form of that, like therapy is a good form of that, But like in general, if the only way we can feel is by dumping on people, imagine if the only way you could poop was by inviting your friends in the bathroom. You know what I mean? It's like stinky, right? So I want to help people learn how to do that. So let's say you're by yourself, you notice you're feeling anxious. So start by being, and you can say it out loud or internally, I'm afraid. And then, of course I'm afraid, giving yourself permission. I'm allowed to be afraid. And then seeing if you can actually drop into the sensations below your chin, so your chest, your belly, and noticing what happens when you actually welcome in your fear. And just while we're at it, I'll give you the quick tip on fear. It's like it's essentially moves in two ways. Remember how I said emotions either explode or implode? So fear is tricky because it does both. And when you like the way the therapeutic industry talks about it is fight or flight or freeze. We have these like, high stress limbic system responses, particularly to things that feel traumatic. So you would first just ask, like, do I want to freak out and run, or do I want to freeze and just like crawl into a hole? And if you want to freeze and crawl into a hole, get in your bathtub, get in your bed, try to slow down, pet your head, put on sad music, and see if you can't connect to the helplessness and cry. Because most implosive feelings like sadness and the helpless part of fear and some of shame will release down and out, like a release like through tears, okay? If you feel more like, oh my God, I gotta get out of here, and you're freaking out, you're frenetic, your heart's racing, you actually want to match that energy. And a simple way to do it that you could do in a bathroom if you're at work, you could do just in 10, 1 minute, is jump, shake your hands, shake your head, stick your tongue out, do a Kali's breath or a lion's breath from like the yoga world where you really try to exhale out the energy. You match the frenetic energy. You could run, you could do a weird playlist of frenetic movements. You could also weave some anger work into that. It's like you match the energy, move it, letting yourself be as scared as you are in either of those directions, and then do what I would again say is the reality testing or recover. So if people in this time, no matter what you're up against, the uncertainty of like what we've all been through as far as, hardships, COVID, like pandemic, whatever it is, whatever personal challenges you're facing, whatever societally you're facing, if you were to do this, at least once a day, maybe a couple times, I'm talking about like something you could do in a couple minutes, let alone like a bigger session a couple times a week, you would get so good at working with your fear. And what that would mean is that you would clear out that backlog of terror that has become your baseline. And what that gives you the opportunity to do is actually have your resting state be, I feel safe. For someone who has had fear their whole life but didn't know what to do with it, and maybe they medicated it with like psychopharmacology, or maybe they just tried to act like they weren't afraid, whatever it was, it's like their baseline is feeling scared all the time. And so when something dangerous happens, it won't matter for them. They're not going to get the signal that there's danger, because that's what fear is supposed to be. We are animals. We're supposed to be like, oh shit, tiger. Oh shit, someone wants to run, And so if you do fear release work periodically, proactively, not waiting for yourself to be stressed, but also definitely when you're stressed and when something squeezes you in your life, you will be able to achieve this very neutral, very safe feeling sense of, I'm okay. And then when fear comes, you'll pay attention and respond to it, So that's what I would give you about fear.
Your tips are priceless, and proactively, so that when the next time that comes up, you're more equipped and know how. I love this.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
it's really
you.
fun. This is like a really good use of my life and
Yeah,
my brain and my mouth.
you've got it going on, woman.
Thanks.
And you know what? I want to thank you for helping people stop shitting on other people, because that's what I heard you say.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, and it doesn't mean that that's never important. Like my book editor, when she first started with my work, was like, Rachel, it sounds like you hate friendships. It's because my mentor was so extreme. He's like a recluse, like in the woods. He's like really like a solo person. That won't work for everyone, but there are ways that we can cultivate relationships with things that are alive. And sometimes it's human, sometimes it's trees, sometimes it's, laying on the earth, sometimes it's music. It's like you have to figure out what helps you, so that if you know you have an option to have your hard feelings by yourself, then you'll know when you need to bring someone in, but you won't you won't have to do that. And I think right now at these times, it's such hard times, as you said, everyone's dealing with a lot. And so, to depend on other people and people that you're not paying, who aren't showing up in their life mission to help you with this, it's a risk. You know, who says that they're like, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been talked out of my feelings. Someone saying you shouldn't feel that way because this or this, which by the way, everyone listening, like that never really helps. You know, you can always ask if someone does bring you their emotional poo, like what would be helpful for you? Do you want to just be heard? Do you want me to problem solve? But most people do not want to be told not to feel what they're feeling, and it will just have them dig in. Whereas if you're just like, oh God, I get it, like you're feeling that, even just that level of I see and it makes sense to me what you're feeling. Of course you're feeling that. Helps someone deepen. And it's not your job, which is why I'm teaching everyone how to have their own emotional poos.
Yes, again, so good. And you know what else? I feel like I could talk to you forever, and I'm sure our listeners are just eating this up right now. But you had shared about it's a risk to share this and to try to get coaching from somebody who's not perhaps seasoned in helping someone in crises. And I will tell you the other thing that it is a risk for is not just bad advice or not being met, it's also a risk of getting dumped on. I've certainly noticed that I have been walking through something so unbelievably horrific for a year and a half now. And I'm super open and raw, and I am good at releasing my emotions and sharing. And, I have people inquiring. And I've also noticed that I have to be careful who I share them with because I've then been dumped on because when people have unhealed trauma and emotions that they've been hiding from themselves, and then here you are, that emotion, woo, all right here in the face, they
Right.
just go, whoosh, take my shit because
Right.
I can't handle it. Clearly, you're processing, so just have some more.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's another great way the metaphor comes through is because you can love someone so much, but if you both eat a burger, whether it's beef, grass-fed beef, or veggie or impossible, whatever kind of burger you eat, you cannot digest their burger. And we can't, even I am not metabolizing my clients' emotions. I am like using my bandwidth to help them metabolize their feelings. So, yes to people kind of feeling the opening and getting some of their feelings out. But one thing we should also know is that someone can't do it for us, and it just creates codependence when we try to, whether you're trying to tell them not to feel or you're trying to match their feelings, and it's another funny thing people do is like someone's like, I'm struggling with this. And the person's like, me too. And it's like this. It's like, everyone is so hungry for empathy and witnessing that I think there's also like kind of very interesting forms of not listening to each other, which is why I think as often as possible, if you can do it for yourself, you can do it with a tree, you can do it with a professional, or get really clear. Who are the people that you actually feel like you can have a clean emotional exchange with? Can be really helpful.
Your work and teachings are so needed. Okay, I have a question for you.
Right.
Is there something that you would go back and whisper in the ear of your 20-year-old self, something you wish that you knew then that you know now?
Mm. So funny. I was like living in Nepal, studying Eastern religions, like turned 21 at a meditation retreat. I was like, oh God, I'm crazy. Um, I wish I knew this. I wish that, I started learning this in my mid 30s, really just like the skill of how to feel as bad as I felt. I wish and I got a little bit of it for sure. I had a lot of help along the way, but I wish that the map that I'm giving now was available sooner for me around just knowing that it was okay for me to feel as bad as I felt and getting really good at that. It's actually a skill. And I would have been happy to start that earlier. And I do regret one thing. I regret like being up in the lawn at a certain Radiohead show, but mostly I don't have regrets because what's the point of that? But, and for me, it took a non-viable marriage actually to real and like working with this mentor that I keep referencing who doesn't want me to use his name, which is why I'm not. And they have the same name, interestingly. And like the mentor's last name is Grant. So it was like this life-changing certain name I'm not going to say on the internet sandwich. But anyway, it took all of like what it took for me to come into it. But if someone could have helped me earlier, oh my God, what would have happened? Oh my God.
Hence why you are providing the roadmap. I love it. You didn't go through all that hell for nothing.
No. Yeah.
Thank you for wanting to help people
Yeah.
from your pain. That is the way.
Yeah.
And is there a big message that you would scream from a mountaintop? Like you want the whole world to know. What is that, Rachel?
I mean, it's learn to have your feelings like you have your poops, and that will lead you to emotional resilience, which is the new happy. And it's better than happy because if you get strong enough to be able to move all those feelings out and achieve that really neutral, solid, warm, safe, okay, self loving baseline, you will be happy most of the time, but you will know that whatever life brings, which we know it fucking will, you can handle your feelings. And that's really where we get free.
Amen, aho, ashe.
Right.
I love it. Okay, tell the listeners where they can find you.
If you go to thefeelingsmovement.com/connect. But thefeelingsmovement.com will get you in my world. And I do a ton of short form video content right now. It's really fun for me. And most of it is happening at Healing Feeling Shit Show on Instagram. So it's like if you just want a little daily dose of like this kind of emotional potty training tips, the Instagram is where to find me now. But thefeelingsmovement.com will put you in my wheelhouse where you can actually learn with me.
Fantastico. Thank you so much. I'm Lisa Eddy, your host of the Sacred Beauty Lifestyle Podcast, which is now being shared here on YouTube. I hope this episode brought you insights and inspiration to radiate and shine with confidence. Remember to subscribe so you receive new episodes hot off the press right when they are released. And follow me on Instagram for more juicy tips at I am Lisa Eddy. Also, ladies and gentlemen, when you subscribe, like, and share these episodes, it helps me to get seen by more people. And that means a lot to me because I am committed to reaching millions of women across the globe and waking them up to the sacred beauty lifestyle, owning their true power and beauty, both inside and out. Now more than ever, we need more women shining instead of hiding. When we band together, we are unstoppable. This is how we change the world, together. Remember the sacred beauty lifestyle and get on out there and shine. The world needs your light.